Hello, and welcome to today's session on the Global 8-Digit BIN Industry Standard Adoption, or numerics as some have come to know it. My name is Erin Schrack, and I am the North America lead for this initiative. Today we are going to be focusing on the merchant perspective. Please take a moment to review this important confidentiality notice. Today, we will be reviewing several topics as they relate to the 8-digit standard and how you are impacted as a merchant. As an FYI, this deck is available for download during and at the end of the presentation on the On24 platform. In this webinar, we will be focusing on Visa's support of the 8-digit BIN ecosystem mandate and explaining what that means for merchants. Here are the key points that are important for all merchants to understand. The payment card industry has made key changes to accommodate 8-digit BIN while keeping the primary account number length the same. Merchants need to be aware of the implications of the industry change, specifically how Visa's program might impact them. Ensure that all data used for transaction processing comes from a reliable source with direct access to BIN information from Visa. BIN tables from the internet have been found to only be roughly 30% accurate in some regions. Merchants who are not able to properly process 8-digit BINs may experience transaction issues, disruptions, unnecessary declines, and complications with fraud detection and management. PCI DSS, or Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, have been clarified to accommodate the 8-digit BINs. And if you have remaining development needs, changes must be coordinated with your acquirer, processor, and other partners as soon as possible. Let's jump in first with what has changed now that the April mandate has passed. To start, let's ensure we have a common understanding of BIN, as well as what's changing with the new standard. A BIN, or Bank Identification Number, is the first 6 or 8 digits of a PAN number and is used across the industry to facilitate the identification of individual Visa issuers. Our specific Visa definition is that this is a number assigned by ISO, or the International Organization for Standardization, to Visa, who in turn licenses these values to our clients. The BIN is always the beginning of the account number. Visa has an agreement with ISO for the 4 series of BINs, and even with the industry increase of BIN length, Visa will continue to exclusively license BINs starting with a 4. The account range is the first 9 digits of the PAN, and this is not changing with the new BIN standard. On the card shown here, the first X illustrates the account range. Visa uses the 9-digit account range for processing parameters and to identify the product. Visa recommends acquiring and processing transactions take place at the 9th digit, as issuers can set different product parameters at the account range, such as tokenization. To confirm, there are not any changes to PAN length with this initiative. They will remain the same, regardless of BIN length. However, this change means that the BIN is now either the first 6 or the first 8 numbers of the primary account number, or PAN. So why did the industry BIN standard change? Just to add 2 extra numbers. Quite simply, to support the growth experienced by the success of the payment industry. The unprecedented growth in payments increased the demand for BINs to a point that the industry supply was declining at an increasingly rapid pace. ISO raised this as a topic in 2015 and assembled payment leaders from around the world to come up with a solution. After much deliberation, they agreed to increase the length of the BIN from 6 to 8 digits. They announced this change in 2017. Visa shortly followed to be sure that our clients had as much advanced notice as possible and ensure that they were aware of the April 2022 effective date for processors and the selling environment. One question we get quite a bit is how common adoption of 8-digit BINs is by issuers. To recap a few key points, Visa has been solely assigning 8-digit BINs for nearly a year. There is currently no mandate for issuers to have to migrate existing 6-digit BINs to 8 digits. but we are highly encouraging them to do so via pricing programs that are in effect this program year. Globally, Visa has been seeing a 30 to 40% month-over-month lift in the number of 6-digit BINs migrating to 8-digit BINs since April. And with current pipelines, we expect that number to keep increasing over the next 6 to 12 months. You may not have experienced impact yet, as Visa has been protecting the ecosystem since April by ensuring that 6-digit BIN prefixes on 8-digit BINs are not shared between issuers. As announced last year, Visa will stop this protection in April 2023, so it is critical that if development is not completed, that be prioritized. Since the mandate has passed and we have been fully live with 8-digit BIN for nearly a year, let's give you an idea of what's going on in the payments ecosystem. First off, nearly all processors and acquirers in all regions have confirmed they are ready to support 8-digit BIN. Many have been ready for quite some time. In some select markets, terminal providers and merchants still have additional development needs. Visa will maintain existing practices of holding returned BINs for at least a year. While this may provide some protection in the near term, if you have not completed your analysis and partnered with your terminal providers to make necessary updates, it's strongly suggested that you prioritize this assessment. As mentioned on a previous slide, Visa announced that we will begin reassigning 8-digit BINs with the same 6-digit prefix in April 2023, potentially to different issuers for different products in different markets. Again, if there remains any lingering development needs, that should be prioritized for completion ahead of April 2023 to prevent potential cardholder disruption. Lastly, Visa has been assigning 8-digit BINs for the last 2 years, and we've been seeing a steep increase in issuer 6-digit BIN migrations over the last year. Since April, when acquirer and processor readiness was mandated globally, we have seen a 30 to 40% lift in 8-digit BIN adoption month over month. And with current pipelines, we expect that number to continue increasing exponentially over the next 6 to 12 months, with 8-digit BIN likely becoming the majority of issuer BIN lengths in some regions. With this slide, I'd like to dive a little deeper into the use of account ranges, or the first 9 digits of the PAN. As briefly mentioned, Visa allows issuers to configure many parameters at the account range, including product identification, routing, tokenization, etc. While it is essential to ensure that you are able to process 8-digit BINs, Visa recommends that transaction processing take place at the 9th digit. Visa will maintain existing policies to maintain distinct BINs by funding source, prepaid, debit, or credit, and whether it is consumer or commercial. But more and more clients are maximizing use of their BINs by differentiating other product features at the account range level. This is an example from a European issuer. You can see the account ranges on their cards include important information about product types, countries, and currencies. The country rights are linked to the regulatory rights to passport in Europe. As a business, setting up your systems to read just the first 6 or 8 digits of the PAN is likely not enough, as it is important to know product type, currency, and country. This is true for 6 digits, where there are 1,000 ranges, or for 8 digits, where there are 10 different account ranges. If you are only relying on the BIN, you may be missing important product and acceptance information that can impact fees, loyalty options, and much more. As more issuers adopt account ranges, it will become increasingly risky to rely on the BIN information for authorization, routing, and transaction and clearing. Why does this mandate matter to you as a merchant? Because when an 8-digit BIN is migrated, that one 6-digit BIN explodes out to 100 8-digit BINs, and then the same 6 digits will be at the beginning of 100 different 8-digit BINs. Right now, we are protecting 8-digit assignments, but in April 2023, we will lift those protections, and 8-digit BINs with the same 6-digit prefix may be assigned to different issuers from different countries for different products, meaning that up to 100 issuers could have an 8-digit BIN with the same 6-digit prefix. Here's an example to illustrate how this will work. This issuer from Canada decides to convert their consumer credit BIN to 8 digits. They will take this one 6-digit BIN and convert it into 100 8-digit BINs. Very likely they will not need all 100 of those 8-digit BINs. In this example, they will only need one. So they release 99 8-digit BINs back to Visa. In time, Visa will license these 8-digit BINs, all with the same 6-digit numbers, at the start, to an issuer in Spain for a debit portfolio, Ukraine issuer for a prepaid payroll program, a U.S. issuer for a prepaid gift or GPR program, and a Japanese issuer with a corporate credit portfolio. In addition, issuers also have the ability to migrate to 8-digit BINs and reclassify unused 8-digit BINs to new products. For example, an issuer may have a consumer credit 6-digit BIN today, but identify a new business need. The issuer may migrate that 6-digit BIN to 8 digits and use one of the newly formed unused 8-digit BINs to create a business debit portfolio. In this circumstance, the issuer remains the same, but they have two separate products with BINs containing the same 6-digit prefix. I hope this makes implications more real, so you can begin to think through scoping the impact to your business. Now, let's talk about how this initiative impacts merchants. Visa partnered with Deloitte several years ago. All of this underscores the conclusion from the Deloitte study that if you have not yet made necessary changes, prompt action is required. The change to your operations may require extended timelines and must be coordinated with your partners. If you haven't launched your 8-digit planning with a thorough assessment, the time is now. If you have started, I recommend taking an objective look. Was your assessment broad enough? Does it include your entire organization? Have you reached out to all the vendors that support you and all of the clients that you serve to ensure there is no impact? One of the unique aspects of this change is that Visa does not use BIN in transaction processing and has limited visibility to clients' proprietary processing and downstream systems. In our partnership with Deloitte, we talked to leading payment leaders with business in over 90 countries to understand where merchants use BIN, what were your challenges in complying with the new standard, and the best ways to ensure you were ready, and how we could best support you. We used a standard questionnaire to go through various capability areas in the payment process and listened. If you are interested in using this questionnaire for your internal assessment, it is available on the visa.com numerics page. Overall, your primary takeaway from the Deloitte study was that every client is different. We can't generalize by country, segment, size, etc. You are all quite unique in how you manage your business and how you manage your setups from your service providers. Over the next few minutes, we're going to share some key findings from the Deloitte study that will highlight the broad impact this industry change may have. These examples are not meant to be comprehensive, but are meant to stimulate your thought process and help you think through how to conduct your own impact assessment. Based on our discussions with merchants and other partners around the world, we know that your operating and processes vary considerably, which means that the consequences of not being ready for this change will also vary for each of you. It is impossible to provide a one-size-fits-all scenario. Risks will vary based on if and or how you are using BIN today. A few of the consequences if you are only using the first 6-digit BIN and are not prepared to support the 8-digit BIN could be reduced efficiencies and possible interruptions to processing capabilities, unnecessary declines, rejections, or misrouting, gaps in fraud management defenses, inconsistencies in reporting, errors in dispute handling, increased reconciliation costs. Let's take a look at scenarios that happen today and may become more common with continued 8-digit BIN adoption. Here's an example that illustrates both lost revenue and inefficiencies. This is a scenario we have experienced in our previous all 6-digit world, and it stems from using inaccurate data at the point of sale to drive fraud decisions. We anticipate these scenarios to occur much more frequently as 8-digit BIN continues to exponentially grow and BINs share the first 6 digits between issuers. In this case, an Eastern European issuer converts a 6-digit credit BIN and a new issuer in the U.S. receives one of their released 8-digit BINs, which they use for a credit program. All goes well through launch, and then there are reports that a large merchant continues to decline transaction attempts for new cardholders. The issuer, the acquirer, and Visa do not have visibility, so cannot explain. Eventually, it becomes clear that the merchant is using 6-digit BINs to drive fraud decisioning and sourcing their data from a table they bought from an unauthorized internet source. They had coded all Eastern European BINs as do not accept, which then means an 8-digit BIN converted from that original 6-digit BIN is getting blocked for no reason. During the Deloitte interviews, they identified some commonalities and potential risks to transaction processing. More than 2/3 of interview participants identified impacts to the merchant point of sale. The most typical examples for use of the 6-digit BIN at POS include PIN bypass eligibility for magstripe transactions and merchant choice routing. Almost half of interview participants identified POS terminals with hard-coded logic based on the 6-digit BIN. It is important to say that this was a small subset of all terminals, but any disruption was considered significant. Over half expect an impact to BIN tables that they load to terminals or referenced within a terminal management system. Since we also have acquirers taking part in this session, I will add that the subset of acquirers that use the first 6 digits of the PAN to route transactions identified broad impacts across transaction processing. For example, identifying product types, debit, credit, prepaid, and service eligibility, such as installments or cashback. Other examples I'll call out include identifying international or specialty transactions, such as co-brand. If the 6-digit BIN is used as part of the clearing and settlement or accounting and reconciliation process, potential impacts included identification of the merchant discount rate or interchange postings and fee reconciliation. The impact assessment interviews were a wake-up call for some of our acquirers, and they said they were using third-party data tables for that limited 6-digit BIN data. And they realized they would need to update their approach for routing logic, processing logic, or applicable tables to accommodate 8-digit BINs. Another area is risks to compliance and fraud processes. This is when the 6-digit BIN is used as a data element in the risk rules for transaction authorization, such as a BIN block for sanctions reasons. Overall, about 2/3 of participants interviewed identified impacts to fraud rules, reports, and supporting systems because they based them on the 6-digit BIN. Examples include fraud monitoring activities and alerts. For select acquirers, merchants define custom rules on acquirer platforms that include BIN in combination with other elements. The participants that use BIN as a part of fraud rules identified varying levels of impact, ranging all the way from minor configuration updates to broader system changes. Fraud reporting was also identified as an impact area, such as segmentation of summary fraud statistics reports by 6-digit issuing BIN. 25% of interview participants confirmed that they use the 6-digit BIN in reporting, and this might well be higher as a good number of the interviewees were going to dig deeper. And now, the risks to services and dispute management. Approximately 60% of interview participants share that they perform searches at the 6-digit BIN. So we recommend you review the use of BIN in your internal servicing tools to identify if development is needed to support 8-digit BINs. During the interviews, some select acquirers continued to provide data and reporting to merchants that included BIN, sometimes just at the 6-digit BIN level. Visa recommends that you review externally provided reporting to ensure it still supports your business need. And if you require BIN information, provides information at both the 6 and 8-digit levels. Additionally, over half of all interview participants stored the 6-digit BIN as a data element outside core processing systems. For example, interviewed acquirers and acquirer processors store BIN within data tables in merchant preprocessors, terminal processing platforms, interactive voice response or IVR applications, and merchant servicing portals. Knowing the increasing importance of downstream systems and services, we want to be sure you interrogate these areas closely and update to accommodate the new BIN length and latest industry practices. In this final scenario, we have a frustrated cardholder from the U.S. trying to use their new credit card to register for a recurring monthly subscription to a streaming channel. This is an extremely large business segment and continues to grow. The cardholder keeps getting an error that their card type is only allowed for one-time purchases. They escalate with the issuer to see why they can't use their card, but most likely the transaction is misprompted at the merchant, and the transaction never makes its way to the issuer, so they are not able to help if they don't see the transaction and the cardholder is in good standing. The inability to set a recurring payment appears related to an outdated or inaccurate BIN file. The U.S. issuer is using an 8-digit BIN for their credit program, which was previously assigned as a 6-digit BIN to a Canadian issuer for a prepaid gift card program. The Canadian issuer had returned this 8-digit BIN back to Visa when they migrated, and in time Visa reassigned it to a new issuer. It appears that the reference table being used at the time of authorization is still only reflecting the previous 6-digit BIN, indicating that this card belongs to a gift card program, which is not accurate. Once again, the issuer, acquirer, and Visa cannot explain why this is happening. The cardholder is frustrated, and the merchant may lose the business as they have different recurring payment capabilities set depending on product type, one-time versus recurring. The merchant prompted based on the assumption that the card was a gift card, but in fact, it is a credit card. Not making changes to support 8-digit BIN may have impacts to your efficiencies as well as your revenues. Only you can answer how this mandate impacts you, but to prevent cardholder disruption, we recommend that all analysis be completed and/or double-checked. As outlined, risks to merchants can be significant if the BINs are used in transaction processing. If a merchant chooses to do nothing, risks of negative consequences will increase as the 8-digit BINs become the majority BIN length, as will most likely occur in several regions over the next year. It is no longer possible to rely on the first 6 digits of the PAN for transaction processing or in downstream systems. Failure points and severity will vary depending on the specific usage of the issuing BIN, setup of the supporting technology, dependencies across service providers, and downstream process flows and associated outputs. Visa will not be able to protect its clients from these consequences as they will not be visible in VisaNet. It is important to conduct an internal assessment to identify how the change to 8-digit BINs will impact your business. The next 2 slides list some common areas where merchants have identified impact areas. If any of these services are outsourced, please ensure that you are actively working with your vendor to ensure they support 6 and 8-digit BINs. Merchants tend to work with common partners such as processors, hardware vendors, acquirers, e-commerce vendors, fraud and security partners, app providers, and many more. Any of these partners may rely on BIN reporting and/or have predefined lookup tools or output fields developed to only read the first 6 digits of the card to make decisions or display the necessary information. Key themes include data warehousing and reporting, fraud management, and transaction processing. In addition, ensure that you review how this initiative may impact your regulatory processes, POS processes, as well as your dispute area. To prevent errors for internal staff and poor experiences for cardholders, ensure all vendors and partners are ready to support 8-digit BINs to make a seamless cardholder experience. As the way you use BIN will be unique to you alone, unfortunately there isn't a predefined roadmap for how to analyze impacts to your business. However, we recommend that you prioritize your internal assessment if you haven't completed one yet, and/or do a double check to ensure your assessment was broad enough to prevent business impact. As mentioned, you most likely use partners for your transaction processing. Merchant readiness must also include processor, partner, vendor, and other entities that participate in transaction processing on behalf of the merchant. It is imperative that merchants receive confirmation of 8-digit BIN readiness from all connected parties. In addition, we recommend that you set up mitigation plans should cardholder escalations occur. Do you have BIN length in your troubleshooting processes? Do you have adequate support from your partners to troubleshoot declines to see if BIN is involved? Do you need to update procedures with your client support staff to identify issues with BIN sooner? With the 6-digit BIN prefix sharing soon, we recommend that you take the time to refresh your troubleshooting processes to identify issues as far upstream as possible. And if nothing else, Visa emphasizes that you should use only authorized tables from a trusted partner to support your operations. The majority of transaction issues historically have come from the use of outdated or inaccurate BIN tables. Reach out to your acquirers regarding authorized tables and do not buy BIN tables off the internet. We expect issues related to inaccurate BIN table information to increase substantially as a result of 8-digit BIN migrations, especially as BIN prefix sharing begins. As a reminder, Visa provides data to our processing and acquiring partners based on account range, and we encourage you to look at managing transactions based on account range also. We encourage you to work with your acquirer or other authorized vendors to review changes to BIN tables and ensure they still meet your business needs. If you are interested in getting BIN information directly from us, Visa offers a BIN service called the Visa BIN Attribute Sharing Service, or VBAS. If you would like more information, please work through your acquirer processor. Let's review the PCI considerations of the 8-digit BIN standard. PCI was a frequent topic during the impact assessment interviews. Last year, clarifications to the PCI standards took place to support the 8-digit BIN initiative. While Visa does not establish the PCI DSS standards, as the Payment Card Industry Standards Council is an independent organization, Visa has been actively working with stakeholders in the ecosystem to review and address the concerns raised. We want to be sure you think through applying them with the new 8-digit industry standard. Prior to diving into details, I will preface that Visa is not providing advice about compliance. Payment facilitators need to review any changes on how they plan to protect their data with a qualified security assessor. First off, there is no impact for PAN data displayed on reports, screens, or receipts. Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards Council allows users with legitimate business needs to see any or all of the PAN digits. Some merchants have inquired about the display of PAN on receipts. Typically, only the last 4 digits of the card number are displayed on the receipt. This practice falls under the masking requirements and doesn't change whether it is a 6 or 8-digit BIN. The other relevant standard applies to protecting data at rest. Security mechanisms to protect PAN data at rest include PAN truncation and PAN encryption. Truncation is a method of rendering a full PAN unreadable by permanently removing a segment of the PAN data. This applies to PANs that are electronically stored. Encryption is a method that applies a reversible algorithm to secure the PAN or specific digits within the PAN, such that the PAN or its digits is available to any entity with the cryptographic keys. This is where PCI and Visa have recently provided updated clarification. Truncation standards have been clarified to allow for the maximum of the first 8 digits of the card number, plus any other 4 digits. This means that only 4 digits needs to be removed. This is a change from the previous industry practice of the maximum of the first 6 digits and any other 4 digits. For data at rest situations, it is up to your business to decide the best course of action. If leaving the truncation at the first 6 and any other 4 digits, inclusive of 8-digit BINs, does not impact your business practices, you may continue to do so as it adheres to the current PCI standard. Visa recommends that you evaluate your business processes and dependencies to see if a change is required to truncate to the maximum of the first 8 digits plus any other 4 digits. Visa's clarification is meant to provide flexibility to clients. There is not a Visa requirement to make changes that would expose the first 8 digits. We are reminding clients that they need to review any changes to how they plan to protect their data with a qualified security assessor. Because Visa does not use the BIN field in transaction processing, we do not have a specific recommendation for how clients who need to expose the full BIN for their own business reasons should manage their data protection. Now let's jump into resources that are available to help you take action. All merchants should be ready to support the new standard effective April 2022. However, potential impacts to the acceptance ecosystem may not be felt until April 2023, when Visa will begin reassigning 8-digit BINs belonging to a previously whole 6-digit BIN. As mentioned, Visa will begin assigning 8-digit BINs with the same 6-digit prefix to different issuers for different products and different regions. There are some regions where 8-digit BIN is quickly approaching becoming the majority BIN length over 6-digit, and we expect that growth to continue over the next year in all regions. As such, it is critical that any remaining development is prioritized to ensure there are not any impacts to you and/or your partners, and you are fully ready to support 8-digit BINs. There are a terrific range of resources available, no matter where you are in your process. We have heard you say that analysis and planning can be overwhelming, so there's a quick start guide and a merchant questionnaire that provides key activities and questions to kick off your planning process. In addition, we touched on the Deloitte findings several times during this webinar. Those interview findings that go into detail for all identified impact areas are available to you on visa.com to help you determine potential impacts across your organization. Our FAQs are quite extensive and a good reference document should you have questions. Previous merchant and PCI webinars are hosted on the visa.com page should you want to dive even deeper. And finally, if you're interested in additional in-depth analysis or project support, fee-based consulting services are available. As with all of our resources supporting merchants, you can find that information on visa.com. In summary, we have learned that the payment card industry has made changes to accommodate 8-digit BIN while keeping the primary account number the same. Merchants need to be aware of the implications of the industry change, specifically how Visa's program might impact them. Ensure that all data used for transaction processing comes from your acquirer and/or authorized partners and is based on an authorized source directly from Visa's data. Merchants who are not able to properly process 8-digit BINs may experience transaction issues, disruptions, unnecessary declines, and complications with fraud detection and management. Payment card industry PCI DSS standards have been updated to accommodate 8-digit BIN, and changes must be coordinated with your acquirer, processor, and other partners as soon as possible. There are several ways to get additional assistance. The first is to reach out to your numeric support team. You may also contact your account management representative at your acquirer processor or at Visa with additional questions. Lastly, visa.com/8-digit BIN is available 24/7 with resources and can be accessed at any time. As a reminder, this deck is available for download through the On24 platform. Let's open it up to Q&A. If we don't have a chance to get to your question, we will follow up with you within a few days. If you have new questions following the webinar, please feel free to send those to the numeric support mailbox.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Randy Muniz, and I will be hosting the Q&A session. We will work to get through as many questions as possible. I am joined today by Aaron Schrack, the host of this webinar, Shakan, who represents Visa at the PCI Security Standards Council, and Ashish, Visa's acceptance subject matter expert. The recording of this webinar will be available on the On24 platform within 24 hours, and you will receive an email notifying you shortly. This recording will also be available on visa.com soon. Let's go ahead and get started. First question is, what if my terminal provider isn't ready?
Thanks. So Visa has been in touch with the major terminal providers globally, and we understand that they have development available to support 8-digit BINs. As each merchant is different, we recommend reaching out to your contact at your terminal provider to identify a solution for your specific needs.
Thank you. We direct MID using the 6-digit BIN. Will this change after the 8-digit for the current BINs?
I believe by MID you mean merchant ID, which is probably the same as the acquiring ID. Those remain 6 digits, regardless of BIN length. Acquiring IDs are no longer a part of the VISO ISO assigned pool. They are a separate 6-digit identifier, so there isn't any change to that.
Do the BINs behave the same way for PANs and DPANs, tokenized card numbers?
So there is not any change to the way tokenization functions. Tokenization today is at the 9-digit account range level and will continue at the 9-digit account range level. So there is no functionality change to tokenization between 6-digit BIN and 8-digit BIN.
Is there a table that we can buy to contain BIN country, card type, and subtype issuer name?
So I recommend you work with who you are obtaining your BIN files from today to ensure that they are updated with the necessary information that you are looking for. As mentioned in the presentation, Visa does have a service called VBAS, or Visa BIN Attribute Sharing Service. You are welcome to work through your acquirer to get identification and register for that service with Visa directly.
The ninth digit is important, but will it be PCI DSS compliant to store it too?
I'm going to turn this one over to Shakan.
Sure, thank you. So generally for PCI, I think the principle is to keep storage of sensitive data to a minimum. If you don't need it, don't store it. But having said that, yes, storing the ninth digit or the first 9 digit, you can absolutely be PCI DSS compliant as long as you store that information securely, like, for example, encrypting the information. So the answer is yes.
Is the full credit number increasing by 2 digits to accommodate the longer BIN, or is the 8-digit BIN just repurposing digits 7 and 8 of a 16-digit number for the BIN?
It is the latter. That's a great question. So the PAN length is not changing regardless of BIN length. It's just the number of BINs that make up the beginning of the PAN could be either 6 or 8 digits.
Will the reclassifications be automatically reflected in Visa's BIN tables for merchants to consume? How can merchants keep up to date?
The term Visa BIN tables can be a little tricky, so I want to clarify that. Visa provides routing tables to our processors and acquirers, and most of those are at the account range level. So I, again, recommend working with your BIN table providers who get that sourced directly from Visa to identify how they're adjusting their tables to reflect the BIN length. Again, if you're interested in utilizing the VBAS service, which is what Visa offers directly for merchants to consume, again, you can find that information via your acquirer.
Does it mean a lot of issuers will reissue cards to cardholders since they have returned a lot of the BIN? How much of that has already happened? Do you anticipate a new wave of updated cards?
For the most part, Visa is recommending as little cardholder impact as possible. From the issuer side, most of the time there is 0 reissuance required because they keep the 8-digit BINs that already belong to the first 8 digits of the cardholder's card. So we have not seen mass reissuance for the most part, and we don't necessarily anticipate that. This should be fairly seamless to cardholders. Again, that may depend on the region that you participate in, and again, that is not a hard and fast rule. Issuers have the ability to do that if they need to, but for the most part, issuers are keeping BINs without having to impact cardholders.
What is the impact on tokenization process as well as on ARN, RRN?
So as mentioned earlier, there is no impact to tokenization, as that is at the account range level. I believe on ARN, RRN, that is another reference to potentially our acquiring IDs, previously known as acquiring bins. There is no change there. They will remain 6 digits. Again, they will not match the issuing bin moving forward if it is an issue who has both an issuing bin and an acquiring ID, but acquiring IDs are separate values remaining at 6 digits and most likely will not begin with a 4.
Do longer bins have any impact on receipt printing restrictions? Max number of PAN digits that can be included on a merchant receipt.
Typically, the receipt printing guidelines are the last 4 digits on the card, which doesn't change regardless of bin length. Shakan, anything else to add?
Yes, so the latest version of PCI DSS version 4.0 that was recently published has that requirement updated. And it now says that the maximum number of digits to be displayed is the bin and the last 4 digits, meaning the first 8 and the last 4. So that is the maximum. It's not a requirement, so you can definitely retain just printing what you have today on the receipts. Of course, that's assuming that your business processes, has the ability to consume that data that's printed on the receipt. But generally, there is really no requirement to update the receipt printing process. But if you do wish to update it, the current version of DSS4 allows for the bin, which is the first 8, and 4 digits as the maximum number of digits to be displayed. This is requirement 3.4 if you would like to refer to PCI DSS document itself.
Thank you. Where can we get an updated 8-digit bins list?
I would recommend working with your authorized party, such as your acquirer or acquirer processor, whoever is providing your bin list to you today, to get that updated list of 8-digit bins. We do have bins migrating on a daily basis from 6 digits to 8 digits, in addition to all new bins that have been assigned since April are 8-digit bins globally. So we recommend that you ensure that your tables are updated frequently.
In designing changes to reports, is there logic to tell the difference between the 6-digit or 8-digit bins? How does my program know whether to look at the list at the first 6 or the first 8?
That will be dependent on the reports that you're already pulling and the data that's already reflected. It's tough for Visa to answer that question, as we don't necessarily have specs that show how acquirers and acquire processors need to provide bin tables. So I'd recommend working with your authorized partner to look at how they've adjusted their reports to show you whether the bin is 6 or 8.
Will FSA cards get 8-digit bins?
Absolutely. So FSA or healthcare cards are subject to these same bin requirements. There are no exceptions to product type for 6 to 8-digit bins. All products are subject to the mandate, and all new bins for all product types since April are issued at 8 digits.
Has Visa made any sets of 8-digit bins for testing purposes?
Yes, there is testing information available. Via your acquirer, they should be able to access those test guides on Visa Online to be able to provide some test bins.
Are the certified bin range providers who incorporate all card types?
I am not certain I'm able to interpret that question. Ashish, any thoughts there?
No, not really.
If you could clarify that question and resend it in, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you, Aaron.
How often should the merchant update their bin list and review the bin table from the acquirer?
As mentioned, Visa is updating bins on a daily basis, and so that will depend on your business needs and how often you need to update your parameters based on how you use bin. So please work with your acquirer and do your through your internal analysis determine how often that needs to be updated. As I mentioned, Visa is having new 8-digit bins on a daily basis.
How Visa ensures that unused bins are released back to Visa, and what's the timeline for that?
So an issuer has the choice on when to release back unused or migrated bins. So once they do that, there is a period of several months where Visa actually goes through the return process after the issuer releases it to ensure that there isn't any trailing activity. And then at the end of that release period is when it would be reflected as either 8 digits or returned back to Visa. So once the issuer makes that choice, there is a period of time where it goes through release, and at the end of the time period, it would be reflected on our routing report.
Is the 6-digit bin causing a lot of declined transactions?
We haven't been notified of any so far. Again, that may be because Visa has been protecting the ecosystem. And so as mentioned, we recommend that you ensure that bin length is included in any internal troubleshooting that you have, especially after April 2023. And that you do that you complete any analysis needed to your systems to ensure that development is complete to make sure that you see whether a bin is 6 or 8 digits prior to that timeline.
Does different Visa country entities use different bin length standards? For example, Visa India published a 9-digit bin length. Chase publishes a 9-digit bin as well. Should a merchant consider 9-digit bins?
So these different regions or banks may publish information at the account range level, which is at the 9-digit. We do recommend that transaction processing take place at the 9-digit account range level, so that may be a choice. But globally, through ISO, bins are either 6 or 8 digits only.
Are changes required at acquirer host or just at terminal providers?
That's going to depend on your use of bin and where you use it. So many merchants may see that they have partners that also use bins to help them, vendors, hosts, things like that. That's why the internal impact assessment is so important, is to determine which partners you use, how do you use bin with them, and determine if changes are needed beyond just your terminal provider.
How will this affect retailers that use format preserving tokens? So our token representation will potentially have a valid 8-digit bin.
There is no change to tokenization. That takes place at the 9th digit, but Ashish, I'll open that up to see if you have any other thoughts there.
That's all I could have said as well, Aaron, which is if it is already coming to you at that particular level and that is compliant with PCI standards, there's no change on the token side.
Let me chime in there, something a little bit to add. I'm guessing that the question is for format preserving solutions that has been deployed, what would be the impact, right? So I think for that, you will have to go back to your solution provider to understand, what they are doing to update the format from 6 to 8-digit bins.
Is there any change to API format to accommodate 8-digit bin?
That will depend on the APIs that you're using. Again, most APIs function at the account range level. We'd recommend working with the partner that has you connected via your API to look at which APIs you are using, and if there is bin length included, ensure that that is reflected at both 6 and 8-digit bins.
Is there a way to tell if the bin is 6-digit or 8 digits when looking it up? If we do a bin search, how do we know if it's correct?
I'm not sure where you're doing your bin search, so this question again is going to be a little bit dependent on the tool that you are using. Within the Visa system, through our bin lookup tools, like on Visa Online and things like that, and within VBAS, we do reflect the bin length, whether it is 6 or 8 digits. So if you are using a tool outside of Visa, I recommend working with your tool provider to ensure that it does that same reflection.
Why is there no information about issuer names in VBAS files?
Well, Ashish, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts there. We may have to take that question back and get back to you.
Yeah, I think we'll take it back and we can respond to that one.
Does VBAS provide bin ranges across card brands, or is it limited to Visa bins?
VBAS is a Visa-offered service, and so we only have visibility within what is within VisaNet, so it's just Visa.
Will card bin and token bins having same product features and other bin parameters?
So typically, an issuer is not assigned a full token bin as tokenization takes place at the 9th digit. So there shouldn't be an issue that takes place between card features there because the issuer chooses on their issuer bin whether to tokenize or not. And the specific product parameters are on the issuing bin, not necessarily on the tokenized bin.
Is there a timeline when all the 6-digit PANs will be moved over to 8-digit PANs?
No, there is currently no mandate for issuers to have to migrate all 6 digits to 8 digits. However, we do have regions globally where 8-digit bin is quickly approaching becoming the majority bin length.
Our processor is set up to accept up to 8 characters for the bin. For the cards being updated, do we need to have our customers update their card information to avoid rejection?
I think that will be dependent on how you utilize bin within your lookup tools, whether it's a static value or not. So I would take a look at how that lookup takes place and determine whether cardholders need to re-update their information based on how you're storing it. Shikan or Ashish, any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the fact that the bin has changed from 6 to 8 or not should not drive a card number or a PAN update. I'm kind of reading between the lines here and assuming this is for a recurring merchant or a credential on file merchant and using cards for it and using like the Visa account updater service for that particular purpose. That really would have no impact from a 6 or 8-digit PIN. If you're getting a replacement card, that's the number you should be using.
Previous communication has been that after April 2022, there would be no more 6-digit bins and they would all be converted to 8-digit bins. The question earlier asked about how to identify 6 or 8-digit bins opposes that statement. Can you clarify, please?
Sure. I'm going to clarify probably what was interpreted based on April 2022. What took place with Visa at the time of that mandate was that all acquirers and processors and terminal providers and merchants needed to be ready to accept cards with 8-digit bins. In addition, as of April 2022, Visa was no longer assigning brand new bins as 6 digits. All new bins assigned since April 2022 have been 8 digits. That being said, existing issuers who own a 6-digit BIN were not required to have migrated their BINs by April 2022, and there is currently no mandate that they have to by a certain timeline. So 6- and 8-digit BINs will continue to function together simultaneously for the foreseeable future.
Could we use RDIF table to update BIN or any other table from edit package?
RDEF is one of our files that contains account ranges to help with identification and product identification and things like that. I don't know that I have a recommendation for which Visa files need to be utilized in order to build your BIN tables. It's definitely one that's an option within our set of settlement and edit package reports. Ashish, any other thoughts there?
Nope, I think you covered it well.
Great.
It was advised that BIN share the first 6 digits with the issuers. Does this mean that the acquirer does not use the 8-digit BIN to process payment with the issuers?
Sorry, I'm rereading the question to try to answer that. The acquirer may or may not, the acquirer needs to be able to read whether the BIN is the first 6 digits or the first 8 digits. A 6-digit prefix will not belong to both a 6-digit BIN and an 8-digit BIN at the same time. If a 6-digit BIN still exists, an 8-digit BIN will not exist with the same 6-digit prefix. So therefore, it's important to be able to read whether the BIN is 6 or 8, but you don't have to worry about reading digits and having the same digits exist as the prefix to both BIN lengths simultaneously. If that didn't answer the question, please feel free to rephrase it and put it back in the queue.
How are interchange calculation errors reported based on 8-digit BIN conversion, if found?
Ashish, I'm going to call on you to see if you have thoughts there.
Sure. If there are interchange calculation errors, I'm assuming you will get files that will be correcting that particular error. And if they are, again, don't see any reason why a 6-digit to an 8-digit PIN conversion would make any difference, because the PAN numbers would drive the interchange calculation error and the rectification as well.
If your company has a 6-digit BIN for our gift card program, will we need to request a new 8-digit BIN?
That will depend on whether the issuer that supports the card and owns the BIN is looking to migrate from 6 to 8 digits. Through that process, they will take a look at which 8-digit BINs within the 6-digit BIN is currently being used and which ones they want to keep or return, but not all issuers are migrating. So I would recommend working with the issuer of those cards to determine what the strategy is going to be for those gift cards.
Good afternoon. If you have a BIN full service where the acquirer side will keep the 6 digits numerics and the issuer side could be split and assigned to other entities. However, the acquired numerics will never be assigned to other entities, correct? I'm sorry,
So,
however, the acquired numerics will never be assigned.
Yeah, let me jump in. I believe you're asking if acquirers can share an acquiring ID, and the answer is no. Those are remaining at 6 digits. And they will not be shared. Regardless of issuing BIN lengths, the acquiring IDs will not be shared between entities.
I think we have time for one more question. How do we get the name of the bank associated with a BIN?
We'll have to take that back. I know that was the second question on getting the name of the bank. I know we have that available in our Visa tools. It may be worthwhile chatting with your acquirer or acquirer processor on what tools they have access or availability to provide, since I know most merchants don't have direct access to Visa Online. But we'll take that question back and get back to you.
Okay. One last question, are the other card brands going to 8-digit bins?
Yeah, 8-digit bins is an ISO standard, so all brands that operate within the Visa rules should be operating with the same mandate of 6 and 8-digit bins.
Thank you. We are running at the end of our time together today. If we were unable to get to your question, we'll reach back out via the numeric support mailbox within the week. You are also welcome to reach out to your Visa representative. Once again, this recording will be made available on visa.com within the next few weeks. Thank you for attending today's session on 8-digit BIN, and don't forget to take the survey at the end of the Q&A.